What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Friday, May 2nd edition of the Ship My Money Show. I'm your host, Adam Scherer. You can follow me on Twitter at ShipMyMoney DFS. Massive 12-game MLB slate tonight, but fortunately, no weather concerns. It doesn't look like on the main slate. There were a couple of games on the turbo slate that have potential rain issues, but last I checked, everything looking okay for the main slate tonight. Still looks that way right now. So obviously keep an eye on that. Make sure nothing surprising happens between now and lock, but does look like we are avoiding any weather issues, which is really nice on a 12 gamer. So going to go game by game, as always, talking about DraftKings tournaments, pricing, ownership, all that stuff. Taking a look at what I would have if the slate started right now in large field tournaments. But most importantly for you guys, just talking through each individual game, matchups, all of that, what looks good, what doesn't. If you have questions, feel free to throw those in chat. I will do my best to answer those as I see them. Also, don't forget to hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel. All that stuff helps out quite a bit. As you can see at the bottom of the screen, we do have our projections available at Run the Sims now as well. Those are the projections you see on the screen. And you can use the promo code UDAMLB written for you on the screen to get 10% off MLB projections over there. That does apply to the full MLB projections package, or also if you are interested in just the browser overlay, the Draft Caddy option, which you're seeing on the screen now, it does apply to that also. This is the browser extension for Google and Mozilla that overlays our projections onto the lineups page. This is included in the full projections package, but also is available as a standalone. So if you are somebody that's playing lower dollars, doesn't make sense, to sign up for the fully detailed, downloadable projection package, you can still get these just overlaid onto your screen. It's also good for late swapping, for making changes by hand later on in the night. If you just need to swap a lineup or two, you can have those projections right in front of you. So use the promo code UDAMLB, gets you 10% off either of the MLB packages over at Run the Sims. Now, starting with the Rays taking on the New York Yankees in New York, about a 5.5 implied run total for the Yankees, about 3.5 for the Rays. Max Fried pitching for the Yankees. Ryan Pepio going for Tampa Bay. There it is. Yeah, Pepio going for Tampa Bay. $7,800 price tag on Pepio, $9,500 on Fried. You can see, as expected, the higher fantasy point projection on Fried here at about 16.5 fantasy points. He's projected for 16% ownership. I'm personally not getting too much of him. It doesn't really have a lot to do with Fried. It has to do with a couple of other pitchers that we'll talk about later on in the show. There are the two highest projected pitchers on the slate are getting a lot of ownership, but I am over the field on both of them. And so it is kind of costing me a lot of exposure to these mid-range arms, which on the one hand, it does limit your diversity if you're going very heavily on two specific pitchers. Fried is, certainly a good pitcher, has a decent ceiling here. Not a great strikeout pitcher, but just a good pitcher overall. Since the start of last season, 22.8% K percentage, 3.41 xFIP. Certainly can work deep into games as well. You get a little bit more pitch efficiency because of the relatively low strikeout percentage, 7.5% walk percentage. Doesn't give up a lot of power. So I do think that Fried is a solid pitching play, but I don't have much of him just because of how much Robbie Ray and how much Tarek Skubal I am getting to, and I'll talk more about those guys later. Ryan Pepio on the other side, obviously a dangerous matchup for him facing the Yankees in Yankee Stadium. He's not getting any ownership. I'm getting to about 8 or 9%, so not putting a lot of eggs in that basket. It's obviously a really scary spot, but Pepio is a talented pitcher. He does have a 25.5% K percentage since the start of last season, 3.98 xFIP. There is talent here at very little ownership. So I am getting to a little bit of him. It is worth noting that his numbers are down a bit so far this year as well. 28 innings pitched. His stuff plus grade is still very good at 105.5, but it's down from about 109.5 last season. His strikeout percentage is 24.5% this year. Again, still good, but down from 26.3% last season. So we have seen a little bit of a drop off there in his strikeout numbers and his stuff plus grade, but still grades out as an above average, as having above average stuff, as an above average strikeout pitcher so far. So I don't mind rolling the dice on him in these large field tournaments and hoping that, you get a big game against the Yankees, even though it is clearly a scary spot. Offensively here, the Yankee side is, of course, going to look better than the Tampa Bay side. There is some ownership coming into New York. Aaron Judge, not surprisingly, leading the way with about 14% projected ownership. Trent Grisham next at about 10%, leading off at 3,900. Then you're getting a bunch of hitters around 5%. It is a 12-game slate. So outside of the hitters that really stand out as either very strong values or the highest projected guys on the slate, like Aaron Judge, you're going to get pretty flat ownership in general. That does mean that it becomes a little bit easier on slates like this to just go to the bats that you want to go to. And I am getting to some New York here, pretty much in line with the field throughout. Trent Grisham showing up about 15% of the time for me. That's the high mark. Aaron Judge showing up about 11% of the time. Yorvit Vivas is showing up 10% of the time for me at 5% owned. He is batting ninth, but he's 2K flat. So it does give you a value bat in an offense that has a very high implied run total. Looking at the splits for Pepio going back to the start of last season, he has allowed a 171 expected ISO to righties, 154 to lefties. So nothing drastic there in terms of split. Strikeout percentage to lefties is a little bit higher than righties, 27% to about 24%. But again, nothing too drastic there. Mostly, I think you're going to just want to be looking to go to the best Yankees bats, whether that's value or upside. Obviously Aaron Judge and Trent Grisham on either end of the spectrum there. For Tampa Bay going up against Fried, pretty hard to want to get to them on a 12-game slate against a very good pitcher in Fried. They are not getting any ownership. They are in Yankee Stadium, which is nice. But I'm not getting to much either. Yandy Diaz, my highest owned Tampa Bay bat in 8% of my lineups right now. He is cheap at 3,900. He's batting second, the first base, third base eligibility. All that's nice. You get some negative correlation against Max Fried, but it's still, there's 23 other offenses, plenty of pitching that is not as good as Max Fried to get to. So nothing that really stands out to me from the Tampa Bay side. Kansas City taking on Baltimore in Baltimore. Dean Kramer going for the Orioles, Michael Wacha going for Kansas City. No ownership coming into either pitcher, and neither pitcher is really getting into my lineups either. I have 2% Dean Kramer at 5,500. I have 1% Michael Wacha at 7,700. The $5,500 price tag for Kramer is certainly too cheap. I've said this a million times over the years, but anytime you're getting a fully stretched out major league starting pitcher at like 5K or 5,500, he is by definition underpriced. But there's just so much pitching on this slate, so many other options you can get to, that it still doesn't stand out as a priority, even from a value standpoint. And then the other part of that is not only is there a lot of pitching to get to, but you have 24 offenses to find value bats from. And with the way scoring is distributed in MLB DFS, your best point per dollar values are pretty much always going to be hitters, because you're going to have $3,000 hitters that hit home runs or steal bases or whatever it may be when there's 24 offenses going. So it just becomes easy enough to find inexpensive hitters that you can use for value without sacrificing the upside that you can get from better pitchers. And then on top of that, you do have a tough strikeout matchup here against Kansas City as well. They do strike out a little bit more on the road, as you would expect, because they're getting out of Kauffman Stadium, but still a very low K team. Dean Kramer doesn't have great strikeout stuff, 20.5% K percentage, 4.4 xFIP since the start of last season. And then on the other side, you're getting Wacha, who has a 21% K percentage, 4.17 xFIP, going up against this good Orioles offense. Even though they've been very hit or miss so far this season, they have hit into quite a bit of bad luck. They are banged up a little bit as well with Jordan Westburg out. But overall, I don't really see any reason to be prioritizing either or getting much at all of either pitcher in this game. Offensively, the bats are going to look pretty good here. 16% projected ownership coming into Jonathan India, leading off at 3,200, third base and outfield eligible. Looks like a good value. I'm actually not getting a ton of him, only showing up about 3% of the time. Hopefully he doesn't put up, a massive game that, a massive score that is difficult to replicate. But generally on slates of this size, I do think it becomes a little bit easier to avoid those popular hitters that are popular because of their salary. Not to say that India shouldn't be more expensive, because he should, but there's just going to be so many other options that are getting a fraction of the ownership that realistically have the same range of outcomes, even if India's median projection is a little bit higher. Those are the guys that I would prefer if I'm going to choose. I'd prefer to get away from the good point per dollar popular hitters more so than your Aaron Judge, Bobby Witt type raw score hitters, because those are the guys that are more likely to put up the score that you just have to have regardless of salary. Vinny Pasquantino getting 15% ownership at 3,100. He's showing up 10% for me. Bobby Witt getting 15% ownership. Michael Garcia getting 13% ownership. So you do see some ownership coming into the Royals here, as you would expect. Drops off a little bit after those four, with Massey getting 9%, Waters getting 6%, and everybody else below that. Across the board, I am a little bit lower than the field on KC right now, but I'm still getting to some. 10% Pasquantino, like I said, 8% a piece of Witt, Garcia, 11% Massey. So I'm actually a little bit over the field on him at 2,400, batting fifth. So it is a good spot for KC. They already play in a good park for scoring runs, but now you're getting them in a better park for hitting home runs, which obviously is even more important in DFS than just simply scoring. So it is a good spot for KC. I do understand why they are getting that ownership, but at the same time, there's no shortage of other places that I can go to for offensive upside. From a stolen base standpoint, decent stolen base projections on Garcia and Witt. We've certainly seen higher in the past, but still some stolen base upside there, in addition to obviously the ability to hit for some power. Since last season, Kramer has allowed a 183 expected ISO to righties, 209 to lefties. And keep in mind that last season, right-handed power was mitigated in Camden Yards a lot more than it is this season. So if you look at those numbers for Kramer going back to last year, 130 or 183 expected ISO to righties, only a 133 actual ISO allowed. That difference in actual power allowed versus expected is very likely to close pretty quickly this season, because he no longer has the ability to allow 370-foot fly balls to left field that turn into outs like he did last season. They'll be back to being home runs like they should be in every single park. So that is something to keep in mind with Kramer. Also hasn't had a good start in general this year, but that is a spot where I would expect him to struggle a little bit, where he got bailed out a little bit last year and in previous years, because of his home park. So that does, set up better for somebody like Bobby Witt, Michael Garcia, these right-handed bats that do have a little bit of power. For Pasquantino, I love the spot, just given the fact that it's always been easy to hit home runs to left field in Camden Yards. He's only $3,100. You can see we have him with the highest home run projection on Kansas City. So I think he looks really good. I haven't built cash lineups, but I would assume he is either your lock cash first baseman, or at the very least on the short list of cash first base options. In tournaments, obviously the math becomes a little bit more complicated because you're talking more about range of outcomes and all of that. But either way, no matter the format, Pasquantino is going to look very good here. On the other side, for Baltimore, they actually are the favored team here, going up against Michael Wacha. Gunnar Henderson leading the way at about 10% ownership. Ryan O'Hearn, Cedric Mullins, Adley Rutschman, Ryan Mountcastle, all coming in around 6%. Laureano and Urias and Holiday around 5% as well. So pretty much 5 to 6% ownership across the board on Baltimore, with the exception of a 10% owned Gunnar Henderson. I'm pretty much in line with the field on all of this as well. Laureano, 9% of my lineups. Henderson in 8%. Urias in 7%, Mountcastle, and everybody else in 6 or less. So pretty much in line with the field. Again, good park for hitting. Not an expensive offense either. You have only a $5K salary on Henderson, who has hit into some bad luck after missing the start of the season with an oblique injury. You have a $5,600 price tag on Mullins, who's been fantastic this year. But other than that, this is a pretty inexpensive offense with a high implied run total going up against Wacha. So I really wouldn't mind getting to more than I am, but again, 23 other offenses as well. Hard to just grab, one team and say, oh yeah, this is the team that I'm going to jam in. So Cedric Mullins looking very good for us. He actually has the second highest projection on Baltimore behind Gunnar. Does have a little bit of stolen base upside here as well. But either side of this game, I think, looks pretty good. There is more ownership coming into Kansas City than to Baltimore, because I think they're even better values than the Orioles are. When you have Massey at 2,400, you have Pasquantino at 3,100. But either of these offenses look fine. Not interested in the pitching here. Guardians are taking on the Blue Jays in Toronto. About a 4.9 implied run total for the Jays, about 4.3 for the Guardians. On the mound for the Blue Jays, Chris Bassett. On the mound for the Guardians, my screen is frozen. Let me get this up over here. Logan Allen going for the Guardians. He's coming in at 6K. Don't have any interest in getting to him. Only about an 8 fantasy point projection here. You can see we have him projected to go about 5 innings, but very difficult strikeout matchup against Toronto. Only projects for like 3 strikeouts. On the other side for Bassett, he's getting about 7 to 8% ownership. He's not really showing up for me, but again, that has to do with how much Ray and the Scooble I'm getting to right now. If you're playing less Ray and Scooble than me, then you should be mixing in a little bit more of guys like Max Fried, like Chris Bassett, just to, fill in those pitcher slots with decent pitchers that certainly still have the ability to go out there and have good games. Not a great strikeout matchup here against the Guardians either, although it is probably a little bit better than Toronto. You have Steven Kwan at the top of that lineup. You have Jose Ramirez batting third. Both of those guys are very, very difficult to strike out. Bassett has been solid so far this season, 2.62 ERA for Toronto. Looking at Stuff Plus for him, a couple points higher on his 2025 Stuff Plus grade at about 100 versus last year at 98. He has had a big jump in strikeout percentage so far this year, 28.5% K percentage this season compared to 22% last year through 28 innings pitched. So that will be something to keep an eye on. Maybe he does, he is better going forward, but you're also paying for it. He's up to $9,300 now in, not an ideal strikeout matchup. So that is something, that's driving his ownership down and lowers my interest in him a little bit as well. But again, if you're not playing as much Ray and Scooble, then you probably should be getting to a little bit more Bassett than I am. Offensively, you have the game in Rogers Center, so it is a pretty good park for hitting home runs. On the Toronto side, I am getting to the Jays going up against Allen. 8% projected ownership coming into Kirk, Santander, and Guerrero. I'm a little bit north of that on all 3 guys, getting to 15% Kirk, 13% Santander, 12% Guerrero. Obviously happy to get to any of those guys. Kirk is very cheap, batting 5th at 2,800 at what is always a pretty weak catcher position. So I like the value play there as well. 238 expected ISO allowed to right-handed hitters since the start of last season for Allen. And this park does play up right-handed power as well. So I like the home run spot for any right-handed power bats in this lineup. After those 3 at the top, 5% projected ownership coming into Bichette is the next highest owned guy. I'm getting about 9%. I'm getting about 7% Springer at 4% owned, 9% Clement at 4% owned, 5% Barger at 4% owned, and then 2% Jimenez, 1% Straw. So I am getting to the Jays. I am over the field on pretty much every relevant hitter in this lineup. Again, I like the power upside for the right-handed bats here going up against Allen. On the other side for Cleveland, 5% projected ownership coming into Jose Ramirez is the high mark. I'm about 2x the field there. Going to be happy getting to a $5,400 Jose Ramirez at 5% owned pretty much anytime that I can. Since last season, Bassett does have very drastic splits as far as power allowed to lefties versus righties. 192 expected ISO to lefties, sub 100 to righties. So far this year, still sub 100 to righties, but has been better against lefties, holding them to a 132 expected ISO, also striking them out about 30% of the time. So there is obviously a decent chance that he's made some adjustments, made some improvements against left-handed hitters, or it could just be a small sample size thing. He's only thrown 288 pitches to them so far this year. But either way, I'm happy taking my chances on a low-owned Jose Ramirez here. I'm getting to about 6% Bo Naylor as a cheap catching option with some power, getting to about 5% Gabriel Arias hitting second with second base and shortstop eligibility. And then it falls off to like 2-3% of the rest of this lineup. So I'm a little bit over the field on Ramirez and Naylor in particular, but overall, I do prefer the Blue Jays side offensively when it comes to this game at pretty modest ownership over there as well. Minnesota going into Fenway Park to take on the Red Sox. Joe Ryan pitching for the Twins. Brian Bayo going for the Red Sox. 2% projected ownership coming in to Bayo. About 12% coming in to Joe Ryan at 9K. I'm getting about 9% Ryan. I'm not getting any Bayo. Bayo is $7,900. Okay matchup, but tough park to pitch in. You're not really getting a price discount. And again, there's just enough other pitching on this slate that I do prefer. Joe Ryan has given up a lot of power to both sides of the plate so far this year. It is a very scary spot for him going into Fenway. but he does still offer you strikeout upside as well. 27.7% K percentage since the start of last year with a 3.45 xFIP. He's also only walked 4% of hitters over that time. So when he's on, you're getting a lot of strikeouts. You're not putting extra guys on base. When he's not on, he does give up power. 1.28 home runs allowed per 9 innings since the start of last season. His stuff plus grade this year, 102, is down about 3 points from last year. Strikeout percentage is coming in at 25.5% compared to about 27% last year. Fastball velo is down about 1.3 miles per hour on average. And like I said, he has also allowed a lot of expected power to both sides of the plate this year. 160 expected ISO to lefties, 152 to righties. No, 201 to lefties, 206 to righties. I was right the first time. It hadn't refreshed. But so you do have these red flags on Joe Ryan. And going into Fenway, with all of those things considered, it is certainly a scary spot. But the strikeout upside is there as well. I think he's perfectly fine as a secondary option. Offensively, I would like to be getting to some Red Sox bats here against Ryan. I had more in the initial run that I did at like noon today than I do right now, but still getting to a little bit here. 7% projected ownership to Devers and Duran leads the way. I'm at 8% and 6% respectively, so pretty much in line with the field there. 9% David Hamilton at 2,500 is my highest owned Boston bat. Gives you some stolen base upside. But most importantly, it's just cheap with MPE, so you do get some value there. But I'm not getting a ton of Boston. 5% Abreu, 4% Bregman, 3% Casas. I wouldn't be upset if I were getting more, just given everything I just said about Joe Ryan and the park. But again, there's plenty of good hitting spots on this slate, plenty of good hitting parks as well. On the Minnesota side, Fields basically at 5% or less on everybody. Byron Buxton, the exception, at like 6.5%. I'm pretty much in line with the field on all these guys as well. Getting to them a little bit against Bayo, but nothing that really stands out. If you look at Bayo's splits since the start of last season, does struggle a lot more with lefties than righties, as you would expect. 181 expected ISO allowed to lefties with only an 18.5% strikeout percentage. Righties have a 111 expected ISO with a 24.9% strikeout percentage. The Twins don't really have a lot of left-handed power, though. They do have 4 lefties in their lineup, but Trevor Larnach leading off at 3,900, decent value play there. Certainly would be fine getting to him. Brooks Lee is hitting third at 3,100, getting 5% ownership. I don't mind that. But most of the bats that you generally want to get to on Minnesota are right-handed and just don't match up nearly as well against Brian Bayo as the lefties do. Also, as a reminder, Fenway Park is much better for right-handed home runs than for left-handed home runs. The A's are taking on Miami in Miami. So a park downgrade here for the A's, but they still have around a 5 implied run total. Valente Beloso going for Miami. Gunnar Hoglund going for the A's. Hoglund coming in at 4K flat, making his major league debut, getting 8% ownership. I'm getting to about 3%. Again, I think if this were a different slate, I would probably be more interested. But you just have so many value bats that you can get to that I don't really want to most likely sacrifice raw points at the pitcher position because what is very likely to happen when you have this many offenses on a slate is that you end up in a position where, let's say, Hoglund goes out there, and so we have him projected for 10.5 DraftKings points. Let's say he gets like 13 or 14 DraftKings points, right? Obviously, that's good for a $4,000 salary. But with this many hitters on the slate and the way value works in MLB DFS, what's very likely to happen is you say, oh, cool, I got a good point per dollar score from my pitcher, but then it ends up being completely irrelevant because enough hitters that are 3K or 3,500 did well that you're still competing with the Robbie Ray, Max Fried, Tarek Skubal lineups that just got good scores from value hitters. And so you still need those raw points. If this were a smaller slate or a slate that just didn't have much pitching on it at all, he would look a lot better. We did have the slate the other day where the rookie for Kansas City was one of the highest scoring pitchers. Like, it can happen at 4K, but clearly it's not particularly likely to happen when you have this many pitchers on the slate and this many good pitchers on the slate. 23 starts, 24 total appearances in the minors for him last year, 130 and 2/3 innings pitched, 22.7% K percentage. So far this year through a handful of starts, 26% strikeout percentage, but doesn't project as a very good strikeout pitcher at this point. Only about a 17% strikeout percentage, give or take, depending on which projection model you're looking at on Fangraphs. You can see in our model, we have him projected for about 3.5 strikeouts here against Miami. So long story short, I think he's a good point per dollar play. I don't think he's a great raw upside play. And on this particular slate, I really don't want to be sacrificing points at pitcher. On the other side, no interest in getting to Belozo here. Offensively, the A's were showing up quite a bit for me earlier, and I am still getting to a pretty good amount, even though it is a park downgrade. Tyler Soderstrom is my highest owned A's bat right now. He is 4,700, but he is batting second with first base and outfield eligibility, which is nice. Getting about 8% ownership. I'm getting to about 13%. Limited sample so far for Belozo, but 13.5% K percentage to righties with a 258 expected ISO allowed, 17% strikeout percentage to lefties with a 232 expected ISO allowed. So he has not shown the ability to limit power to either side of the plate. He does not get swings and misses against either side of the plate. And this is an A's team that, while they have plenty of swing and miss in their lineup, they also have plenty of power in their lineup. And I do like being able to get to some of that. So I like Soderstrom. $2,400 Seth Brown, batting sixth, showing up about 9% of the time for me at 3% ownership. There is a lot of pinch hit risk on him. You can see here, we have about a 24% chance of being pinch hit for. That factors in who's available in the Miami bullpen and all of that. The Marlins do only have one lefty in their bullpen, but they did not play yesterday, so he should be available today. And if you look at the way that the A's lineup is set up, they don't really stagger right-handed and left-handed hitters. So you have JJ Bleday hitting fifth, you have Brown hitting sixth, then you have a righty in Urias hitting seven, and then left-handed Nick Kurtz hitting eighth. So it is pretty likely that once you get to the middle innings, they do bring a lefty in to handle this Bleday, Brown, Urias, Kurtz part of the lineup, and Brown ends up getting pinch hit for by a right-handed hitter. So there is high pinch hit risk on him, but it's still not a guarantee. One thing that I mention a lot is, you're stacking these teams, and so you're hoping that they score a bunch of runs. And obviously, if they do it early, that increases the chances of them, adding on more. If this is, a 7-8 run game in the fifth inning, the Marlins aren't going to care that much about matching up. They're going to care more about just throwing somebody in the game that can eat multiple innings and get them on to tomorrow. So it's not, a foregone conclusion that he gets pinch hit for. But if this game is competitive in the middle innings, you probably are getting a pinch hitter for Seth Brown. But he is very cheap and he does have power upside. Urias and Langelier showing up 9% apiece for me as well, a little bit north of the field. 6% Rooker, 6% Bleday, and then a couple percent of Urshela and Wilson. So I do like the A's a little bit more than the field here, despite the park downgrade. On the Miami side, about a 4.5 implied run total for the Marlins, which is relatively high for them in this park. So that's something to keep in mind. You always want to keep baselines for teams in mind. Augustin Ramirez getting the most ownership at 6%. I'm getting to about 11%. 4,200, so that price tag has jumped quickly, but he has hit very well since his promotion, and at a weak catcher position, happy to get there. Eric Wagaman, Xavier Edwards, 4% projected ownership to each of them. I'm getting to 7% on Wagaman. I'm getting to 4% on Edwards. Other than that, 2-3% most of these other Miami bats. So nothing that stands out as a clear top priority, but I do think Ramirez is the best offensive play from Miami as a $4,200 catcher. Dodgers are taking on the Braves in Atlanta. My God, there's a lot of fucking games on this slate. 5.5 implied run total for the Dodgers, 4 implied run total for the Braves. Yamamoto going for the Dodgers, Grant Holmes going for the Braves. No ownership coming into Holmes, as you would expect. About 14% coming into Yamamoto at $10,300. And he's just another casualty of how much I like Tarek Skubal and how much I like pitchers against the Rockies, even if they are named Robbie Ray. So I'm not getting too much Yamamoto here. Certainly wouldn't fault anybody for it. He's a very, very good pitcher. There's no question about that. You do have some concerns over, how deep in the games he works at times. We have him projected for about 5 1/3 here, but still projected for almost 6 strikeouts. Very good strikeout pitcher since coming over last season. 29.5% strikeout percentage, 6.5% walk percentage, 2.68 xFIP is the best on the slate. So he's very, very good. If you want to play Yamamoto, great. Like I've said a couple of times, I'm getting a ton of Tarek Skubal. If you tell me that you don't want all of your eggs in the Tarek Skubal basket because Yamamoto has the same ceiling, I'm not going to argue with you at all. I don't disagree. So That's fine if you want to go that route. It's just not the route that it looks like I'm going to be taking. We do have a pretty big gap in median projection between Skubal and Yamamoto, and I think that is the case most places in the industry as well, which will be reflected in ownership. Offensively, the Dodgers are the team that obviously I'm going to be more interested in going up against Holmes. I don't think he's a bad pitcher or anything like that, but this offense is very, very good. That goes without saying. 130 expected ISO allowed to lefties since the start of last season, 190 to righties, or 199 rather. So you actually do have some reverse splits as far as power numbers go for Holmes. That being said, I do not care. I will still take a left-handed Shohei Ohtani. 17% of my lineups, 14% for the field. Don't need to say a lot about Ohtani. I don't think he is one of the best hitters in baseball, if not the best. 6,300, multi-position eligibility, all of that is fine. Gives you stolen base upside as well. You can see we have him projected for about a quarter of a stolen base here, which is relatively high. So clearly like Ohtani. Then you get less ownership to the rest of this team because the parts that you want to get to are pretty expensive. $5,900 price tag on Freddie Freeman, getting 6% ownership. $5,400 price tag on Teoscar Hernandez at 7%. 4K Will Smith at 9%, $5,700 Mookie at 6%. Bottom of the order is a lot less expensive, so you can make some Dodger stacks that have a couple of the really good hitters and then some value bats in there. But if you're trying to stack like 1 through 5, it is going to cost you quite a bit. Maybe that's the type of lineup where you do use Gunnar Hoglund. You say, all right, well, maybe the Dodgers score 20 runs today and it all comes from their best hitters and I need this 4K pitcher. Obviously not super likely, but that type of build, it would make some sense. But clearly Ohtani looks great. I'm getting to 8% Will Smith at catcher, pretty much in line with the field. I am over the field on Miguel Rojas, 2,200, just using him as a value bat, probably mostly mixed in with Dodger stacks, I would think. 100% of my Miguel Rojas lineups have at least one other Dodger in them. 69% of them are 5-man Dodger stacks, 23 or 4-man Dodger stacks. So I'm not playing naked Miguel Rojas, but I am using him as a way to offset the cost of some of those other Dodgers bats. I'm getting to 8% Mookie, 7% apiece on Pages and Muncy, and then 3% or less on Conforto, Freeman, Hernandez. So of the expensive bats, even though clearly there's nothing wrong with going to them, Freeman and Hernandez are the ones getting the short end of the stick for me in exchange for being able to get to Ohtani, Betts, and Smith, at least around as often as the field, if not more. On the Atlanta side against Yamamoto, it is storming in Baltimore now, for whatever that's worth. I think it's supposed to be clear by the time the game starts, but I keep getting distracted by flashes of lightning outside my window. Not getting to the Brave side, neither is anybody else. Clearly there's talent here, and that's about all you can say, I think. Even if you're not playing Yamamoto, I don't think it makes a ton of sense to be negatively correlating on this slate with the Braves because the window, that gap is just so wide for Yamamoto to be able to not have a great game that you have to have at 10,300 and the Braves to also not have a game that you have to have. If they score 4 runs against him, he's probably not your optimal pitcher and the Braves probably aren't your optimal stack. And that's just obviously a lot more likely to happen than them actually blowing up Yamamoto. So I'm getting 1% Matt Olson. That is my highest owned Brave bat right now. Einsteinium said Brave slate, and if not them, you already know the Cubs are inevitable. Yeah, Cubs were not inevitable yesterday. I assume you're going to some Belozo and stacking the Braves. Houston taking on the White Sox in Chicago. Framber Valdez for the Astros. Jonathan Cannon for the White Sox. I'm not getting to much of either pitcher. Framber Valdez, 8,800, Cannon, 6,300. Valdez is getting 18% ownership. He's another one where if you're playing more balanced at pitcher, by all means, go to him. The matchup is very good against the White Sox. He is a good pitcher, even if the strikeout numbers aren't exactly where you would want them to be. 23.5% K percentage since the start of last season, 21.8% in 28 innings so far this year. His stuff plus grade is actually quite a bit better this year than in the past. 111.5 compared to 107. His velocity is up about between 1 and 1.5 miles per hour. Obviously not going to fault anyone for going to the guy that strikes out 23% of hitters with like 3.2 xFIP against the White Sox. I probably honestly would like to have more. Like, I know that I have a lot of Robbie Ray at 8,600. In my head, at least, I think I would prefer to like have some of that Ray turn into Framber Valdez, given the volatility that comes with Robbie Ray. But at the same time, not going to be super upset about jamming jamming Ray against the Rockies. So yeah, that was distracting. Jonathan Cannon showing up in like 1% of my lineups as well. He's been better this year, but obviously the matchup sucks against the Astros. Really tough strikeout spot. Not a good strikeout pitcher, even though the strikeout numbers are better for him. His stuff has looked better so far this year. I mentioned it on a show the other day, but 101.7 stuff plus grade for Cannon, 95 stuff plus grade last year. So the stuff's been better. Strikeout percentage is up about 2.5 points. Velo is about the same. I do think he's somebody to keep an eye on in good matchups. Like, he's going to probably be under projected in spots, but this is not that matchup. And no, Jake, I didn't jump at the Thunder. I jumped at the like orange flash of lightning that I saw out of the corner of my eye. It preceded the Thunder. The Thunder didn't help, but yeah, it was the lightning that seemed like it like came in my window. On the other side, or offensively rather, I am getting to the Astros here, even though I do think that Cannon is improved. This Astros lineup is still solid. Park is good. All of that. 11% projected ownership coming into Yordan Alvarez, 9% to Pena, 9% to Altuve, 8% to Walker. So they are getting some ownership, but again, 12-game slate. The ownership's just not going to be all that high. I'm getting to 19% Alvarez. I'm getting to 16% Pena. Those are the two priorities for me here. 3,900 for Pena leading off looks like a very good value. 19% to Alvarez at 5K, hasn't had a great start to the season, and you can take advantage of that against a pitcher in Cannon that doesn't get a lot of swings and misses. Since last year, a 178 expected ISO allowed to lefties, 166 so far this season. So I really like getting to those guys. And then whatever Altuve, Walker, Diaz, Paredes you get to, anybody else in this lineup is fine. But to me, I think the priorities here are Yordan Alvarez and Jeremy Pena. On the White Sox side, I am not getting to much of them, even though I'm not getting to Valdez. Similarly to the Braves, I mean, not similarly in that the White Sox suck and the Braves don't, but similarly in that, it's a big enough slate. I don't think that simply not having Valdez is a reason for me to like be taking a big stand on the White Sox or anything like that. Andrew Vaughn would be my highest owned White Sox bat at 5%. Luis Roberts getting the most ownership from the White Sox at 3.5%. Seattle getting a nice park upgrade going into Texas. 4.5 implied run total for the Mariners, about 4 for the Rangers. Brian Wu, 8,400. Jack Leiter, 7,300. I'm not getting to either pitcher. The field is getting to Brian Wu. And just going to repeat again, if you are priced around Robbie Ray and you're not named Robbie Ray today, I probably don't have much of you. And that doesn't mean that people shouldn't play them. It's just that I think there's, the way my stuff ran and the way my process played out, I think there's a bigger advantage in playing an increased amount of Robbie Ray at his projected ownership than there is in mixing in Framber Valdez and Brian Wu, etc. Max Fried. Doesn't mean that's right. It doesn't mean that you have to agree or anything like that. I think all of these guys are perfectly solid plays. I will point out that it is a major park downgrade for Brian Wu. You still, don't have Corey Seager available for Texas, so that is a benefit. But he is going from the best pitcher's park in baseball to not remotely close to the best pitcher's park in baseball. Since last season, he has struck out only about 22% of hitters, but he does only have a 3% walk percentage, 3.75 xFIP. He's only allowed 1 home run per 9 innings. Again, that is a stat that is going to be impacted by pitching in Seattle, though. So it is a little bit scary spot for him, but he is only 8,400, getting 14% ownership. I don't really have a problem with it, even though I'm not getting there. Offensively, I am getting to this game a bit. Both sides of it actually look kind of interesting to me, given that the park is good for power. And I do think that both of these teams certainly have some power upside here as well. Starting on the Mariners side against Leiter, Jorge Polanco getting 6% ownership. He's my highest owned guy on Seattle at about 10%. Very limited sample for Leiter, but since last season, 442 pitches thrown to lefties, only an 18% strikeout percentage, 177 expected ISO. On the other side, 21% strikeout percentage against righties, has allowed a 198 expected ISO to right-handed hitters, so that's worth noting. But Jorge Polanco, Cal Raleigh, showing up as my top 2 guys from Seattle, like those left-handed power bats, getting the park upgrade. They have become more expensive, so that's going to limit my exposure to them a little bit. But still at 4,700 and 4,900. There is a lot of power here. And Polanco in particular, I think is another interesting one to think about or to talk about because, last year he was horrible. But prior to that, like going back to his time with the Twins, he was a good hitter and had plenty of power. Last year, if you were anything like me, you just lost a bunch of money playing him at continuously dropping salaries, waiting for things to turn around. So he is the type of hitter where, I think there's kind of a tendency to then look at him this year when he's hitting well right out of the gate and say like, oh, this is crazy that Jorge Polanco is up to $4,700. This is the price tag that Polanco was outside of last season. I think there's a pretty good chance that whatever was going on last year is just fixed, and Polanco's back to being a good hitter. Cal Raleigh obviously has always been a good power hitter. Julio Rodriguez getting 8% ownership is actually the highest mark on the team. I'm not too far behind that at 7%. After those three, my interest level drops off quite a bit. 4% JP Crawford, 3% Arozarena. But Polanco, Raleigh, Rodriguez look like the priorities to me from the Seattle side. On the Texas side, Jock Peterson getting the most ownership at 4%. I'm getting to 11%. He has been awful so far this season, but the result is that you get a $2,300 hitter batting third. He does come with pinch hit risk as well. The Mariners bullpen, though, does only have one lefty, and it is a setup guy. So they don't have any left-handed middle relievers, and that does lower his pinch hit chances quite a bit. We only have him with about a 16% chance of being pinch hit for here. In different matchups, that number would certainly be a lot higher if the Mariners had more lefties in their bullpen, and also if it wasn't a guy that generally is going to be used with a lead or at least in a very close game at the end. In most games where Jock Peterson ends up getting pinch hit for, your Ranger stack wasn't good anyway because they're playing a competitive game in the 7th inning or the 8th inning. So either your Ranger stack wasn't good or the Mariners also went nuts. So most of the time, though, that Peterson gets pinch hit for, you probably don't really care because that lineup didn't really matter. Most of the games where the Rangers are doing well, Peterson's probably not getting pinch hit for. So just an interesting thing to note here with the way the Mariners bullpen is set up. Josh Smith getting 3% ownership, showing up 5% of the time for me. I'm getting the 7% Wyatt Langford at 2% owned. I think that looks pretty good. Just, stolen base upside, power upside. He has a pretty low stolen base projection in this matchup, but it's not nothing. Has some power upside as well. Looking at Woo's splits, I mix him up in my head with Bryce Miller all the time, so I'm not going to go from memory, and I'm glad I didn't. 140 expected ISO to lefty since last year. I think it's Bryce Miller that has issues with left-handed power. So again, Woo is just a solid pitcher overall, but you are getting a park downgrade here. You are getting really cheap salaries on the Rangers, and then you're getting, plenty of park upside. If I look at my Rangers 5-man stacks, I would expect that. So actually I don't really have a lot of Rangers 5-mans. It looks like I'm using them. I have no Rangers 5-mans. I have one Rangers 4-man. So it looks like I'm using Texas in a lot of like mini stacks. A lot of like Texas 3-mans, where if I look at, kind of what those look like, Yamamoto plus Ray, Skubal plus Ray with good hitters. Yeah, there's good hitters, there's good pitching, so I'm just kind of using them as relatively high upside value that also is contrarian, but don't have full 5-man Texas stacks. Cubs are taking on the Brewers in Milwaukee. 4.5 implied run total for the Brewers, 4.8 for the Cubs. Ben Brown pitching for the Cubs, Quinn Priester for Milwaukee. 4% projected ownership coming into Brown at 7,500. I have 5%, so right with the field there. Quinn Priester, who I assume Einsteinium is jamming into his lineups, is not getting any ownership at 6,600, and I'm not playing him either. Actually, I don't know. You're a big Quinn Priester guy and a big Cubs guy, so I don't really know how that goes. Priester, not really an option here. Brown, secondary option at best if you get to a little bit of him. He does have some strikeout upside with a 26% K percentage, 3.98 xFIP. Not a great strikeout matchup against Milwaukee. Certainly not a slate where you're starving for pitching. Offensively, the Cubs are the side that I would certainly prefer getting to, but I'm not getting personally too much of either side. 8% projected ownership to Kyle Tucker is the high mark for hitters in this game. I'm getting the 1% of him, 7% ownership coming into Hap. I have 4%. I have 2% Suzuki, 5% Crow Armstrong. So I have small amounts of the Cubs, but a little bit behind the field, although outside of Tucker and Hap, they're not getting much ownership at all either. On the Milwaukee side, Wouldn't expect to be getting too much of them. Highest owned guy over there is William Contreras at 5%. He is my highest owned guy as well in 3% of my lineups. So overall, not really interested in either of these offenses, but certainly would prefer getting to the Cubs side. Jenna said, is that a bullpen game? Which game are you referring to? The answer is no, because I don't think I've talked about a bullpen game yet. But just to clarify, Ken said he saw Alexander pitching for Milwaukee somewhere. Okay, yeah, so that must have changed after I ran stuff. Let me pull that up because I'm seeing Tyler Alexander listed now too. It could just be them piggybacking, but yeah, so Priester's following Alexander, it looks like. So either way, don't play the pitchers here. It gets tricky when it's those like guys like that in particular, because Alexander actually can give you more than like an inning or two if they wanted him to. So yeah, I mean, you're not playing either guy anyway. Alexander, has thrown as many as 83 pitches in a game this year. He's gone 5 2/3. So like if they wanted to go 3 innings and 3 innings or 4 innings and 4 innings, they could. My guess is that maybe they probably want Alexander facing Tucker for Tucker's first at bat is probably why they're doing it. So it's probably going to be like an inning or maybe, 2 for Alexander, and then they go to Priester. But long story short, if you play the Cubs, I think they're fine, and I wouldn't play either one of Alexander or Priester. Mets taking on the Cards in St. Louis. 4 implied run total for the Cards, 4.3 for New York. Sonny Gray for the Cardinals at 8,300. Clay Holmes going for the Mets at 8,100. 16.5 fantasy point projection for Gray is pretty solid. 13 for Clay Holmes. Not a great matchup for Gray, though. But he is only getting 9% ownership at 8,300. I'm getting the 14%. So of the 8 to 9K guys not named Robbie Ray, Gray is one of the ones that I am actually getting to a little bit. I'm actually a little bit higher than the field there. Probably doesn't surprise anybody that has followed my thoughts on Sonny Gray for any period of time. But nice to see that apparently our projection model over at Run the Sims is on the same page as me when it comes to Sonny Gray in general. He has a 29% strikeout percentage since the start of last season, only a 5.5% walk percentage, 23.5% K percentage is actually third best on the slate behind only Skubal, and then 0.2 of a point behind Joe Ryan. Slightly ahead, half of a percentage point ahead of Yamamoto. 2.94 xFIP is better than every pitcher on the slate other than Yamamoto and Skubal. Like, the guy is really, really good and not getting much ownership at all at 8,300. So even though the matchup here sucks against the Mets, I do like it as just a talent play, a way to be relatively different in tournaments without sacrificing much upside. Not getting the Holmes, Fields getting the 6%. If you want to roll him out some, that's fine, but I do prefer the Sonny Gray side. Offensively, I'm not getting much of either game. Neither is the field. Juan Soto is my most used guy in 5% of my lineups. He's the field's highest owned guy in 3%. I don't think there's a whole lot to say about the offenses in this game in the context of this slate. Detroit taking on the Angels in LA, Anaheim, Orange County, whatever you want to call where they play. Jose Soriano going for the Angels. Tarek Skubal going for the Tigers. And I've already mentioned it a couple of times, but absolutely love getting to Skubal here. Don't have any interest in getting to Soriano. 9% projected ownership to Soriano at 6,900. If you do need to pay down, I think it's fine, but he's not in any of my lineups right now. 20.4% strikeout percentage with a 3.7 xFIP since the start of last season. Tigers do have a pretty healthy implied run total between 4.5 and 5, though. Tarek Skubal, just one of the best pitchers in baseball, does get a park downgrade here going into Anaheim. This is a good park for offense, but Skubal's 30% strikeout percentage is the best on the slate. 4.5% walk percentage, 25.5% K minus BB percentage is the best on the slate by like 2 full points. 2.81 xFIP is better than everybody except Yamamoto. He is $10,500, so he's a couple $100 more than Yamamoto, but does project quite a bit better for us. He's in 75% of my lineups right now. Field is projected for about 28% ownership. I would expect if you're playing small field stuff, higher dollar stuff, you see that ownership on Skubal come up a little bit as well. But kind of like, I was saying with Robbie Ray, it's the same thing for Skubal. Basically, what this is telling me is that even though he is the most or one of the most popular pitchers on the slate, I think that there's still more value, or it's still more exploitable to go to more Tarek Skubal at that ownership than it is to go to more of a lot of these pitchers at their current projected ownership, even though it's lower in raw numbers than Skubal. I think that they're probably more correctly owned than Skubal based on how we have him projected. So getting to a ton of Skubal, and obviously not going to be mad about that. He is really, really good. Offensively, I am getting to a little bit of the Tigers here, specifically Kerry Carpenter, which doesn't surprise me at all. I generally get to Kerry Carpenter more than most people, but he's $3,900, only getting 3% ownership. I'm getting to 10%. Perfectly fine with me going up against Soriano. As I mentioned, I do think Soriano is a decent enough pitcher. Only a 118 expected ISO allowed to lefties since the start of last season. But I also think Kerry Carpenter is a good hitter that hits the ball hard, has plenty of home run power at 3,900. 4% Riley Green is my next highest owned guy. Other than that, I'm not above like 3% on anybody here. So not really interested in the bats too much in this game. It's mostly Tarek Skubal or bust with some Kerry Carpenter mixed in. And then finally, wrapping things up with the pitcher that I have a lot of and really don't want a lot of, Robbie Ray, going for the Giants in San Francisco, taking on the Rockies. For the Rockies, it is Antonio Senzatella, $8,600 price tag on Ray, $5K on Senzatella. I don't need Senzatella on this slate at $5K. I think if I'm paying down, I would rather just go to Hoagland at $4K. But Robbie Ray getting 38% ownership at 8,600. He's in 73% of my lineups. So probably I would assume around half of my lineups have Ray plus Skubal. And then most of the other ones have at least one of them. 66% of my lineups have Ray plus Skubal, which, again, is taking on quite a bit of ownership at pitcher, but because there's 24 offenses, I can just make up for it with bats. So Ray has not been very good this year. Ray, even when he is good, is still a volatile pitcher. 28.9% strikeout percentage since the start of last year is obviously very good. 13% walk percentage is bad. 1.6 home runs allowed per 9 is bad. 4.3 xFIP is bad, or at least not good. And then so far this year, his stuff plus grade is down to 99.2 from 105. His strikeout percentage is down from 33% last year to 23% this year. He's lost about half a mile an hour on his fastball. There are plenty of red flags here for Robbie Ray, but at the same time, you're talking about like 28 innings pitched. And most importantly, he's facing the Rockies in San Francisco. You cannot get a bigger park downgrade than being the team that plays your home games in Coors Field, and now you're playing in San Francisco. And then on top of that, the Rockies do not even have a major league team that plays in Coors Field. So you have a bunch of minor league players now playing in San Francisco. Brenton Doyle's good. Jordan Beck has shown the ability to hit so far this year. Hunter Goodman has, shown power in the past. Ryan McMahon is good, but this lineup gets pretty bad pretty quickly after those guys. It's arguably the worst team in baseball. So again, I'm getting a lot of Robbie Ray now. Would I be upset at all if I run this stuff before lock and I'm down to like 40 or 50% Ray and it's getting me to more like Framber Valdez and Brian Wu and Max Fried? Like, not at all. I would probably feel better about that just from a, risk tolerance standpoint. But at the same time, you can see our projection on Robbie Ray and how it differed from those other pitchers in his price range, how much higher it is. And we're not on an island there. If you look across the industry, it's pretty much like that across the board. There's not a lot you can do. Like, our projections factor in data from this season, stuff that isn't that stabilizes quickly and that like we think is important so that we can actually try and be early on pitchers improving or getting worse, etc. Even with that factored in, he just still projects so well because he does have the long track record of being a very good strikeout pitcher. It probably didn't just evaporate in the offseason, and he's facing the Rockies in San Francisco. So there's kind of just nothing that you can really do to not make him look really good against the Rockies in this spot, unless you just say, look, I refuse to play this guy, which is obviously pretty risky also when he's only $8,600. So I'm getting a ton of Robbie Ray. If I diversified more, I wouldn't be mad about it, but also not going to be too upset about just taking a stand there and hoping that it works out. As far as bats go, not getting to a lot. I'm getting to more of the Giant side, as you would expect. They do have about a 5 implied run total in San Francisco. 9% ownership coming into Adames and Chapman. I'm in the ballpark on both of those guys. I'm getting 7% Patrick Bailey as a $2,900 catcher, and then like 5% or less of everybody else in the lineup. So Adames and Chapman look like the best options there. I am getting some Colorado against Ray. I think, when we've talked about these pitchers that like I'm not getting them or their opponent, like Yamamoto, like Valdez, I do have a little bit more interest in actually getting hitters against Ray than I did against those guys, even though I'm playing so much Ray, obviously talking about different lineups, but Ray is just more volatile. Like Framber Valdez, Yamamoto, those guys are pretty likely to just go have good games. It's just a matter of, in Yamamoto's case, you're basically comparing him to Skubal at the same price, and I'd rather have Skubal. In the case of somebody like Valdez, Ray does have more strikeout upside. But here, like Robbie Ray is more likely to have a bad game than any of those pitchers, just based on who he is. So no ownership coming into the Rockies. And then also, you're getting 35 to 40% ownership to Ray compared to like 15 to 20% for somebody, for those other guys. So there is a little bit more power in stacking against him as well. Not that I'm going overboard with it or anything like that, but I do have 6% Brenton Doyle, 6% Hunter Goodman, 5% Jordan Beck. So the middle of this order, I'm 2 to 3x the field, but that's still a very small amount going up against Ray. Like this park still obviously is not good for home runs. So yeah, Jake said nobody has a worse floor and higher ceiling than Ray. Yeah, it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't when he is in this spot at 38% owned. Like if you do what I'm doing right now and you double the field, so you're getting like 75% Ray, and then he just goes out there and goes 4 innings because he throws 100 pitches because he can't stop walking people, you're going to feel like an idiot because you just played 40% owned, the most volatile pitcher probably in baseball. But then if you don't play him and he just goes out there and has the good Robbie Ray game where he strikes out 13 Rockies in 5.5 innings or something, you're going to feel like an idiot because he was only 40% owned and like the clear best mid-range pitcher on the slate. So you're probably just kind of going to be pissed off no matter what you do, unless it goes your way. Like you have the absolute potential to feel like an idiot no matter what part of this you take. So I right now, at least, am on the Robbie Ray side. At least like I can keep looking at my lineups throughout the night saying like, oh yeah, I have Robbie Ray still to go before he throws 42 pitches in the first inning probably. But yeah, Jenna said, I missed your thoughts on Ryan. He's getting like 12% ownership. I'm getting 9%. So I'm right around the field. He does really scare me because it is a park downgrade for him. And the Red Sox obviously do have a high upside lineup in Fenway. Ryan's stuff hasn't been quite as good this year. His expected power numbers to both sides of the plate are up. So I think 12% owned 9K Joe Ryan is like always going to be fine just because he has good strikeout stuff. But I am really scared of this park and matchup, but I am still getting some of them. So to recap, my highest owned players right now: pitching, Tarek Skubal, Robbie Ray, fall off of a massive cliff and get to Sonny Gray, Joe Ryan, Ryan Pepio. CJ said, how's the weather looking right now? It's sunny now. It moved through pretty quickly. I forgot it even rained. At catcher, Alejandro Kirk, Agustin Ramirez, Cal Raleigh, Shea Langoliers, Will Smith. At first base, Guerrero, Pasquantino, Christian Walker, also Shohei Ohtani. He, in the aggregate, is my highest owned first baseman, but most of it's in the outfield. At second base, Michael Massey, Yorbit Vivas, and Luis Urias, along with Miguel Rojas. So second base, I am using as a value position. I think this is actually something really interesting to point out as I look at my exposures. My top 6 second basemen are $2,800 or less on DraftKings. Then you get to Alex Bregman showing up 4% of the time. So I am looking to pay down at second base. At third base, Jose Ramirez, Ernie Clement, Matt Chapman, and Rafael Devers. At shortstop, Jeremy Pena, Willie Adames, Bo Bichette, Mookie Betts, Bobby Witt, Gunnar Henderson, all in the same range. And then in the outfield, Ohtani, Alvarez, Grisham, Santander, Jock Peterson, Aaron Judge, Kerry Carpenter. For stacks overall, Toronto, Houston, Dodgers, Yankees, A's are my 5 highest owned stacks. My 5 highest owned 5-mans are the Dodgers, the Giants, the Blue Jays, the Orioles, and the Royals. So that wraps this one up. Thank you for checking out the show. Good luck on your lineups tonight. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up button, and don't forget to subscribe to the Run the Sims MLB projections using promo code UDAMLB. Gets you 10% off your first month through May 31st. So sign up, use those projections. Really happy with those. Have a good weekend. May or may not be back tomorrow, so make sure you subscribe to the channel and find out if I'm doing a Saturday show. Not going to commit to it yet, but might do it. Haven't been bad the last couple of weeks. Either way, have a good weekend. Maybe see you tomorrow. Otherwise, see you on Monday.